What happens when an undercover CEO watches one of his hardest-working employees collapse from exhaustion and realizes he's the reason why? Brandon Keller, CEO of Northridge Market, pulled his worn baseball cap a little lower over his eyes as he stepped into one of his busiest retail locations. Dressed in a weathered hoodie and faded jeans, he looked like just another customer. But this wasn't just a routine visit. It was personal. For weeks, his office had been flooded with concerning reports: high employee turnover, customer complaints, and alarming claims of overworked staff. This particular store, located on the city's south side, came up again and again. Determined to see things for himself, Brandon went undercover. The moment he walked through the automatic doors, the tension in the air hit him like a wave. Aisles were disorganized, shelves were half-stocked, and customers moved through the store with visible frustration. Employees looked overwhelmed, darting from task to task with exhaustion etched into their features. Near the front counter, a young woman caught his attention. She was slender, with her dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. Her name tag read Zara. She moved briskly, balancing a tray of pastries in one hand and a roll of cleaning towels in the other. Despite her clear fatigue, she still greeted each customer with a smile. "She's been here since 6 a.m., a tired cashier murmured to Brandon. "That's her third double this week." Brandon's brows pulled together. 3 double shifts? In a week? Throughout the day, he kept an eye on Zara. She never stopped moving. One minute, she was stocking frozen goods. The next, she was assisting customers, cleaning spills, and answering phones. Each time someone approached, she greeted them with energy that was quickly fading. As Brandon stacked cans beside her in the frozen foods aisle, he asked gently, "You sure you don't need a break?" She laughed dryly. "If I take a break, there's no one else to pick up the slack. Too much to do. Doesn't your manager step in?" Zara gave a small shrug. "Says we're lucky to have jobs at all." Brandon felt anger simmer beneath the surface. This wasn't how a store should run. By mid-afternoon, Zara's energy had clearly hit its limit. She rubbed her temples constantly, leaned against counters to stay upright, and moved slower with each passing hour. Brandon watched in growing concern. Then came the crash. From the back room, a loud thud echoed through the store. Brandon ran toward the sound, heart hammering. There, on the cold tile floor, lay Zara, surrounded by toppled crates of bottled water. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. "Zara," he shouted, dropping to his knees. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not," Brandon said, gripping her cold hand. "You're burning out." Ignoring the store manager's complaints about dramatic employees, Brandon pulled out his phone and called 911. "I'm staying right here," he told Zara. Paramedics arrived quickly. "Dehydration and exhaustion," one of them said. "Her body just shut down. She's lucky someone found her in time." As they loaded her onto the stretcher, Zara gripped Brandon's hand again. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I should have worked harder." His heart broke. "You don't need to be sorry," he said gently. "This isn't your fault." As the ambulance pulled away, Brandon turned to the store manager, a man named Rick. His voice was ice. "We need to talk." The next morning, Brandon sat in the store's cramped break room. Zara was in the hospital, recovering. But the image of her apologizing haunted him. Moments later, Rick sauntered in, coffee in hand. "If you're waiting for Zara to clock in, she's not coming back." Guess she couldn't handle the pressure. Brandon stood. In the office. Now. Inside the manager's office, Brandon watched Rick fumble with paperwork. "What's your problem?" Rick muttered. "My problem?" Brandon stepped closer. "One of your employees collapsed yesterday. Why didn't you give her a break?" Rick scoffed. "Zara always volunteers for extra shifts. I figured if she wanted the hours, she could handle it." Brandon's voice dropped. "It's your job to manage staff, not to run them into the ground." Rick rolled his eyes. "Look, we're short-staffed. Corporate keeps cutting hours. I don't make the rules." "No," Brandon said. "You just ignored them." He reached into his pocket and laid a card on the desk. Rick stared at it. His face turned white. "Brandon Keller, CEO, Northridge Market. I didn't know." "You didn't try to know," Brandon said. "You're done here." Brandon visited Zara later that afternoon. She looked weak but smiled when she saw him. "You're the guy from the store," she said softly. "I'm Brandon Keller, CEO. I wanted to say, I'm sorry." Her eyes widened. "You're the CEO?" He nodded. "And I let this happen." While Zara recovered on paid leave, Brandon made sweeping changes. Schedules were reviewed, staff meetings held, and employee concerns prioritized. Rick was replaced. Training was improved. Rest breaks were enforced. When Zara returned a week later, Brandon greeted her personally. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said, "but nervous." "You don't have to be," Brandon smiled. "I want you to be our new assistant manager." "Me? I'm just a cashier." "You're exactly what this store needs." Zara accepted the role. Her first weeks were tough. Some staff resisted. One cashier, Derek, was openly skeptical. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," Zara said. "I just want to make things better." She led by example. Cleaned floors. Reorganized stockrooms. Stayed late. Slowly, the team noticed. One night, when a delivery didn't arrive, Zara drove across town to pick up emergency supplies. When she returned, she rallied the staff to restock shelves before the weekend rush. Even Derek nodded in respect. "Didn't think you'd pull it off," he said. "Told you," she smiled. "I'm here to help." When an irate customer yelled about a receipt error, Zara calmly resolved it, apologized, and offered a free coffee. The man left satisfied. Brandon, watching from nearby, was impressed. "You handled that better than most managers I've seen." "I'm just trying to lead the right way." Within weeks, the store transformed. Staff smiled more. Customers returned. Team morale soared. Brandon returned for a meeting. "Zara," he said, holding a small plaque, "you've shown that leadership means caring, not commanding. This store is what it is because of you." Tears filled Zara's eyes as her coworkers applauded. But Brandon wasn't done. He offered her a new role, regional training supervisor. Zara accepted, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I deserve this," she whispered. "You earned it," Brandon said. "Now help others do the same." Zara stood in her old store a month later, now thriving. She passed the wall of employees and paused at her photo. Beneath it, for compassion, strength, and dedication. "We're not just selling groceries," she said quietly. "We're building something that matters." And she returned to her team, the true heart of Northridge Market. What happens when an undercover CEO watches one of his hardest-working employees collapse from exhaustion and realizes he's the reason why? Brandon Keller, CEO of Northridge Market, pulled his worn baseball cap a little lower over his eyes as he stepped into one of his busiest retail locations. Dressed in a weathered hoodie and faded jeans, he looked like just another customer. But this wasn't just a routine visit. It was personal. For weeks, his office had been flooded with concerning reports, high employee turnover, customer complaints, and alarming claims of overworked staff. This particular store, located on the city's south side, came up again and again. Original content preserved here, shortened for display. Zara stood in her old store a month later, now thriving. She passed the wall of employees and paused at her photo. Beneath it, for compassion, strength, and dedication. "We're not just selling groceries," she said quietly. "We're building something that matters." And she returned to her team, the true heart of Northridge Market. 3 years later, Northridge Market had undergone a transformation that became the subject of business case studies, podcasts, and national media. The store that once saw overworked employees and unhappy customers had become a model for ethical retail management. The secret to the success? People. Brandon Keller never forgot the lesson he learned that day when Zara collapsed in the stockroom. It became a turning point not just for him as a leader, but for the company itself. Zara Lopez, now the Director of Employee Culture and Development, traveled across the country speaking to new hires, inspiring district managers, and mentoring other women who, like her, had once felt unseen. Her story, rising from exhausted cashier to company executive, resonated with thousands. Employees began sharing their own stories of growth, of being heard, of being valued. The Northridge Foundation was born, co-founded by Brandon and Zara. It provided scholarships for employees' children, emergency financial aid, and leadership development programs. They implemented a company-wide mental health initiative with on-site counselors, flexible scheduling, and a mental wellness hotline. Turnover dropped by 60% in 2 years. Customer satisfaction soared. But beyond numbers, the heartbeat of the company had changed. One spring morning, Zara walked through the flagship Northridge Market store with her daughter, Sophia, now 5 years old and endlessly curious. "This is where Mommy used to mop floors," Zara said, pointing at the back corner. "And where she learned that being kind and strong at the same time is the real kind of leadership." "You were a boss here?" Sophia asked, eyes wide. Zara smiled. "Not at first, but I earned it. One choice at a time." That same day, Brandon stood before a national leadership summit where he was being honored with the Ethical Business Pioneer Award. He wore a tailored suit, but he still kept the same scuffed baseball cap in his briefcase, a reminder of the day everything changed. When it was his turn to speak, he walked on stage, paused, and looked across the room of entrepreneurs and executives. Years ago, he began, I thought I knew what leadership was. I thought it meant tough calls, big decisions, and bigger profits. But one day, I watched an exhausted employee collapse because of the system I had allowed. And I realized the kind of leader I wanted to be wasn't the kind who stands at the top of the mountain alone. It's the one who climbs back down and helps others rise. He looked toward Zara, seated in the front row. She taught me that. The room stood in applause. After the event, a young CEO approached Zara. How did you do it? How did you gain everyone's trust? Zara thought for a moment. You don't lead to be followed. You lead to serve. You show up. You listen. You stay human. That night, back in Chicago, Zara and Brandon met for their regular leadership check-in over coffee in the break room of their first store. We came a long way, huh? Brandon said. We're not done yet, Zara replied. Together, they outlined a new vision, a national mentorship program to elevate retail workers into community leaders, a podcast to share employee stories, a digital platform for training and support across industries. They called it Ground Level because they both knew real leadership starts on the ground. A month later, Zara stood in a new Northridge Market location in rural Texas. A young manager there, Miguel, was struggling with morale. Zara watched quietly as he handled a difficult customer with patience. Afterward, she approached him. You're doing better than you think, she said. I don't know, Miguel admitted. Some days it feels like I'm invisible. Like what I do doesn't matter. Zara pulled out a small card from her wallet. It read, Leadership isn't about being seen. It's about seeing others. This kept me going when I was in your shoes, she said. Miguel took the card and smiled. Weeks later, Miguel wrote a letter to Northridge HQ, praising Zara for reigniting his purpose. That letter was framed in her office next to her plaque. And so the ripple continued. 10 years after Zara first collapsed in that break room, Northridge Market celebrated its 75th anniversary. The keynote speaker was not a celebrity CEO or outside consultant. It was Zara Lopez. She walked onto the stage, greeted by thousands of employees in matching Northridge shirts, and stood behind the podium. When I started, she said, I was invisible. I felt small. And the system we had back then made me believe I had to earn my humanity. But someone saw me, and then I learned to see others. Now, we lead differently. Not with fear, not with silence, but with compassion, courage, and community. We don't just build stores here. We build people, and that will always be our greatest legacy. The applause that followed didn't just honor her. It honored every quiet act of leadership. Every night someone stayed late to help a coworker. Every time a manager offered a break instead of blame. Every moment someone remembered that people matter more than product. Brandon joined her on stage, older now, but still wearing that baseball cap in her honor. Together, they raised a banner that read, Northridge Market, built by hands, led by heart. The legacy was alive. The mission continued. And at the center of it all stood one woman who once mopped floors and now moved mountains. Zara Lopez, the soul of a company, the voice of a generation, the proof that when you lead with heart, you build something no one can tear down. Not just a store, a movement, a future.